Live to Canberra, where the opposition's immigration spokesman, Scott Morrison, is speaking.
Australia as part of this arrangement. She was briefed on that early this week. She was well aware of that when she sat down with unions on the Friday. And what we have here is a Prime Minister who's been caught out talking out both sides of the mouth. On one day, she's expressing outrage and her concerns at this agreement, and then on the next day, she's saying she supports this agreement. This is a Prime Minister who one day is deeming mining entrepreneurs and the next day is doing deals with mining entrepreneurs. And it just shows yet again why people can't trust this Prime Minister. The unions can't trust her even, her ministers can't trust her. The Australian people certainly know they can't trust her over her deceit over the mining tax and over the carbon tax. But what we're seeing on a daily basis now, as this Prime Minister continues to fail the integrity test because she just can't be upfront with the Australian people. Mr Shorten also still has questions to answer on this matter about what involvement he had in allegedly seeking to change this arrangement during the course of the week. And what we have is a government that is divided and dysfunctional. We have a government that's given up its phony class war and has now gone to war with itself. We have ministers and prime ministers who clearly aren't on the same page, and a prime minister who had to be dragged kicking and screaming to support her own minister in the parliament today for an agreement that she was fully aware of and that was announced last Friday. So a prime minister speaking out both sides of her mouth on this issue, which is no surprise, and the Australian people have come to expect it.
Does the opposition support enterprise migration agreements?
The coalition does support enterprise migration agreements, and we have for a year, ever since it was announced. The specifics of this agreement we haven't seen the detail of yet. I requested a briefing from the Minister's office on that, and I look forward to getting that briefing this week. But in principle, the arrangements as outlined are things that we support. We do support Australians working in these arrangements. We do support the need to provide a guarantee of labour supply to these projects to ensure they go ahead. The Minister doesn't have to convince the opposition of this. The Minister has to convince his own Prime Minister and his own government of this, which just shows how at odds, how dysfunctional and how divided this government is over such important matters. And the Prime Minister engaging the doublespeak of wanting to oppose it with unions and support it with the business community just shows how double-minded and disingenuous I think the Prime Minister has been on this issue.
So you don't have a problem with the foreign workers coming in. Do you think there needs to be clear guidelines like a jobs board to make sure that Australians get priority over foreign workers?
Well, the requirements of 457s are that Australians are first in line for these jobs. We know because we introduced 457s. We know of the monitoring arrangements that are needed in these areas. So it's not the opposition the government and the Minister has to convince in terms of these projects and the importance of having security of supply arrangements for labour to ensure these projects go ahead, which will deliver Australian jobs. She's preaching to the converted. He's preaching to the converted. The Minister needs to convince his own colleagues, which he clearly hasn't done, and this government is completely double-minded. Now, this is important because stability, certainty is critical for investment decisions in this country. They have already shattered confidence in terms of sovereign risk issues over the mining tax, and now the way the Prime Minister has botched yet another issue with her poor judgment and her doublespeak feeds further uncertainty into this critical sector for the Australian economy.
Is it fair enough, though, that the Prime Minister can rail against Gina Rinehart when it comes to the mining tax, but also support a business decision like this if it's going to create jobs?
Well, I think what we've seen from the Prime Minister is just rank hypocrisy, and also from the Treasurer Wayne Swan. I mean, Wayne Swan today has outed himself as a double agent in his own phony class war. He's on one side saying he's opposed to mining magnates, and on the other, he's doing special deals with them.
Isn't it fair enough that they can separate the two issues?
I think it shows the lack of integrity in the Prime Minister and the Treasurer's dealing with the Australian community on this issue and with the resources sector more broadly. I mean, they want to demonise Australians for the very projects that they now want to praise them for at the same time. And this is a government that just can't get its story straight because they don't know what they believe. This Prime Minister doesn't know what she believes. She goes into an absolute vortex on these issues because she has no reference in terms of her own beliefs. Does she support enterprise migration agreements or not?
It took her an eternity to actually make a statement in support of that in the House today, and she had been briefed on every last detail. And if she can't do that in the House like she did today, then I don't think Australians can have confidence in her judgment, and I don't think her colleagues as ministers can have confidence in her support for them either. I mean, Chris Bowen and other ministers were hung out to dry by this Prime Minister last Friday, and no wonder this government is falling in on itself. Thanks.
Thank you.
And that is the opposition's immigration spokesman, Scott Morrison, speaking in Canberra there. He was trying to exploit some perceived divisions in government ranks about this enterprise migration agreement that's been granted to Gina Rinehart's Roy Hill operation in WA's Pilbara region. That allows her to bring in about 1,700 foreign workers. There have been a lot of questions during question time today from the opposition about whether the Prime Minister herself is fully on board with that decision, and the opposition's immigration spokesman, Scott Morrison, trying to once again exploit those perceived differences again there today.